Maybe you still remember the sound of his paws walking around the house. It wasn't tall, it wasn't something that attracted attention, but it was constant. It was that light sound on the floor, going from the living room to the kitchen, stopping near you, like he just wanted to make sure you were still there. And now, what hurts the most? It's just silence. Because when that sound disappears, the house isn't just quiet. She looks different, more empty, colder, stranger. And maybe you're living it right now. Maybe there is still a corner of the house where you automatically look, even though I know he's not there anymore. Maybe you still expect to hear that noise at night, or feel like, for a second, he's still around. But there is something that few people talk about, and that's exactly what this video is about. Because sometimes, when a new dog arrives in your life, things start to happen. Little things, almost imperceptible details. But they make you stop for a second and think, this is not normal. And no, it's not about replacing. It's not about forgetting. Much less about moving on as if nothing had happened. This video is about something much deeper. It's about understanding why, in some moments, the new dog seems to carry something of what is gone. It's about that behavior, that look, or even that specific way of approaching, which seems too familiar. And maybe you felt this, but he never had the courage to speak, because it seems strange. It seems like a head thing, or even guilt. But let me tell you one thing clearly. You are not alone in this. And most importantly, this may mean more than you realize. In the next few minutes, you will understand, why does this happen? Why do so many people live exactly the same experience? And especially, why this feeling may not be coincidental. If you've ever lost a dog, and today you feel that something new is not entirely new, this video can completely change the way you see it. It can alleviate that silent guilt. It might make sense of that strange feeling, and maybe bring a kind of peace you didn't even know you needed. Now tell me honestly, have you ever had the feeling that your dog, even after leaving, still found a way to stay? Because if this has ever crossed your mind, what you're going to hear now may move you more than you imagine. But before continuing, respira por segundo, because the next part, it doesn't just talk about longing. She talks about the emptiness that remains, and that no one really understands. After he was gone, the house remained exactly the same furniture, the same objects, the same smell for a while. But at the same time, nothing was the same anymore. Because what really filled that space, it wasn't something you could see, it was presence. And that's when a type of pain begins that almost no one can explain. You get up and automatically looks at that place where he used to sleep. The bed is still there, or maybe it isn't anymore, but the space remains marked, as if the house remembered, as if that corner still had a story that hadn't ended. And the strangest thing is this. No one outside notices. People continue their lives normally. They say things like, "It will pass," or "You can have another one." But they weren't there, in simple moments. They didn't see him following you around the house without making noise, just to be close. They didn't see you when you went to the kitchen, and he went along, when you sat down, and he lay down on the side. These little things, that seemed common. These are precisely the ones that are most needed, because they were the ones who built the bond. And maybe you're realizing this now. Maybe you've already found yourself walking around the house, and for a second, he slowed down, as if there was still someone accompanying you. Maybe you still avoid certain times or certain places because they bring back too strong memories. And there is a detail that almost no one talks about. The silence of the house is not just the absence of sound. It is an absence of response. You call, and no one comes. You arrive, and no one waits. And this creates a type of emptiness that is not just physical, It's emotional. It's like part of the routine had simply been deleted, and you try to follow, try to rearrange everything. But some things don't get rearranged. They stay, like loose memories, scattered throughout the house. A person once commented on something that really resonated. She said that for weeks. I kept placing my foot carefully when getting out of bed, afraid of stepping on the dog, even though I knew he was no longer there. Do you understand? The body remembers, even when reality changes, and maybe you understand exactly that. Because this kind of bond, it's not just emotional, it is lived. It is repeated every day until it becomes part of who you are. And when that disappears, don't disappear all at once. It echoes in habits, in the reflections, in simplest details. And it is at this point that something starts to happen inside you. A space opens up, a space that was not meant to be empty, but also cannot be filled in anyway. And maybe that's exactly where that everything starts to change. Because when a new dog appears, he doesn't just come into your house, he enters this space. And it is at that moment things you didn't expect begin to emerge. And then, one day, he arrives. Not in the same way, not with the same story, not even with the same past, but enough, sometimes small, curious, sometimes quieter, observing everything carefully. And at first, everything seems normal. You try not to compare, try not to create expectations, just try to give it another chance for a new beginning, and for a few days, or even weeks. It seems like that's all it is. A new dog, a new routine, a new phase. But then, things start to happen. Simple things, almost imperceptible, but for some reason, make you stop. Maybe it's the way he walks around the house, or how he chooses exactly the same place to lie down, without anyone showing it, without anyone teaching it. Maybe it's the way he follows you, even when you don't call. You get up, go to another room, and when you realize, he's already behind. In silence, the same way as before. And at that moment, something inside you changes. It's not joy, it's not sadness. It's a strange mix, as if something familiar had returned, but in another form. And you try to ignore it, tell yourself it's a coincidence, that every dog does this, which is normal. But it's not always that simple, because there are details that are not common. One person said something curious. She said the new dog, in the first week, went straight to a specific corner of the house, a corner where the old one used to be, when I wanted to be alone. No one ever showed that place. It didn't have a strong smell. There was no visible stimulus. But he went, and it stayed. As if you already knew. At first, she laughed. He thought it was funny. But after a few days, began to notice other things. The way to lie down, the way of looking, the way he reacted when she came home. It was too similar. And then came the discomfort. Because when it starts to feel like too much, it's no longer just a coincidence. And it starts to touch on something deeper. Something we can't explain. And maybe you felt this too. That moment when you look, and for a second, he wonders if it's just an impression, if it's just nostalgia trying to fill space, or if there is something there that goes further. And that's right there, which begins one of the hardest parts to deal with. Why notice these similarities? It doesn't just bring comfort. It brings doubt. It brings a kind of silent conflict that many people keep to themselves and that almost no one has the courage to say out loud. But he is there, growing little by little, and you feel it, even without fully understanding it. And perhaps the question that begins to arise, even if you avoid it, is this: what if it's not as new as it seems? Because if this idea has ever crossed your mind, what comes next? You can mess with all of this even more. And it is here that almost no one is completely sincere, because in the midst of these small similarities, of those coincidences that begin to repeat themselves, a feeling that is difficult to admit arises: blame. Not obvious guilt, but silent. You start to realize that you are getting attached, and at the same time, holding back, as if deep down, love that new dog just the same, if, somehow, betray what is gone, and that confuses everything, because a part of you wants to give in, want to laugh again. You want to feel that presence again. But the other part keeps comparing, without wanting to, without realizing it. The way he looks, the way he reacts, the way he approaches you. And when that look happens, that silent look, who seems to understand more than he should, something hangs inside you. Because it's not just a look, it's recognition. It's like, for a second, you weren't looking at someone new. And that scares. You try to push that thought away. He says it's all in his head. Que é saudade projetada. That it's just the heart trying to fill the void. But then, he does something. Something small, something specific. Something that only the other person did. And at that moment, it can no longer be ignored. One person said that her new dog, I had never seen a certain toy. It was stored, forgotten. But one day, she decided to take it. And before even showing, the dog was already excited, as if he knew exactly what it was, as if he remembered. And it was there that she started to feel strange, because along with comfort, doubt came. I'm replacing, or am I finding myself again? And perhaps this is the hardest question of all, because she doesn't have a logical answer. It messes with memory, with love, with absence, with everything at the same time. And if you've ever found yourself comparing, even though I try not to, if you've ever felt like something there seemed too familiar, then you know exactly what we're talking about. This conflict is not about the dog, it's about the bond, about what is not completely finished, and that, somehow, appears to still be present, even if in a different way. And it is precisely at this point, when doubt grows, that something happens, something that completely changes the way you see all of this. But before that, there's a specific moment, a type of behavior that you simply can't ignore. And when it happens, doubt is no longer just doubt. There is a moment, which doesn't seem big when it starts. But then, you realize that nothing has ever been the same. It usually happens on an ordinary day. No preparation, no expectations. You leave home, solve simple things, live another normal day. And when you're coming back, don't even think much. Just open the gate or lean on the door, as I did before. And then, happens. He's already there, waiting, standing in exactly the same place, before you even make a sound, even before any sign. He just knew. And when you enter, he reacts. Not like a dog that's happy, but as someone who recognizes, as someone who already knows that moment, that reunion, that routine. And in that moment, something inside you freezes, because it's not just about waiting at the door. It's the way. It's time. It's the exact intensity. As if it had already happened, many times before. One person shared something like this. She said that for months, the new dog never stayed at the door. He never demonstrated this behavior, but one day, for no apparent reason, he began. And it wasn't just about staying there. It was exactly at the time when the old dog always waited. No delay, no error, every day. At first, she tried to ignore it. He thought it was a coincidence. But then, he realized something even stronger. He didn't just wait. He looked the same way, just as calmly, with the same certainty, no exaggerated anxiety, no fuss, just presence. As if that moment was too important to be just instinct. And it was there that she said she felt something impossible to explain. It wasn't fear, it wasn't joy, it was recognition. And maybe, if you've ever experienced something similar, you know exactly what we're talking about. Because this kind of situation, it doesn't look new. It looks like continuity. And this is where everything changes. Because up until this point, you could still say it was a coincidence. I could try to rationalize it. He could protect himself. But after that, it gets more difficult. Much more difficult. And it is at that moment that a sentence starts to make sense in a different way. Some bonds don't end. They just find another way to continue. And when that idea comes in, she changes everything. Change the way you look, change the way you feel. It even changes the way you remember. Because maybe what you thought you had lost has not completely disappeared. Maybe just changed path. And before you try to explain this, or even reject this idea, there is something you need to consider. Because the next part, it doesn't just talk about coincidences. She talks about something that can make sense to everything you've felt so far. What if? Isn't it a coincidence? Essa é a parte que muita gente evita. Why accept this possibility? It completely changes the way you understand everything. So far, you have tried to explain, tried to fit it into logic, in behavior, in instinct. But there comes a time in which explanations begin to not be enough. Because that's not all he does. It's how you do it. That's when it does. It's the feeling that appears together, as if there were an invisible continuity, calling what was to what it is now. And maybe. The mistake is in trying to see this only rationally, because there are links that are not built only in time. They are built on repetition of presence, on ordinary days, in shared silences, in the little rituals that no one notices, but that shape a deep connection. And when a bond like this is formed, it doesn't just disappear. It remains, not in the same way, but it doesn't disappear either. Some lines of behavioral science suggest that dogs capture human emotional patterns with impressive precision. They read micro-expressions, energy changes, invisible routines. But that still doesn't explain everything. Does not explain why some behaviors arise without learning. It doesn't explain why certain reactions feel like memory. And this is where many people start to consider another possibility, not for sure, but as a feeling. The idea that the bond continues, somehow, not necessarily as a literal return, but as a presence that finds a way, as if what was built between you was too strong to simply cease to exist. One piece SSOA wrote something simple, but very deep. She said, "I stopped trying to understand if it was him, and I began to feel that what was between us was still here." Do you notice the difference? It's not about proving. It's about recognizing, about allowing feelings to have space, without needing to force an explanation. And when you look at it from that side, the guilt begins to subside, because it no longer feels like a replacement. It looks like continuity, as if you weren't starting over, but continuing something that already existed. And that changes everything. Change the way you allow yourself to feel. It changes the way you look at the new dog. And mainly, it changes the way you see loss. Maybe it wasn't an absolute end. Maybe it was a transition. And if that's true, so that emptiness you felt, it was not created to remain. It was created to be transformed. And that's exactly why, that, when you least expect it, that sound may return. Not the same, but familiar enough to touch something deep inside you once again. And when that happens, you start to realize that maybe, never really been alone. Maybe, you didn't realize it at the time, but one day, that sound came back. Not exactly the same, not at the same pace, not with the same weight, but familiar. The sound of paws around the house. Again, you're sitting, distracted, or doing something simple. And then listen. That light walk, going from one room to another, approaching slowly. And for a second, your heart reacts before your mind, as if he already knew that, as if that sound was not completely new. And maybe you'll even stop, be silent, just to hear better, just to be sure. But deep down, it's not about confirming the sound. It's about what he awakens. Because this time, the silence is no longer empty as before. It was filled in another way, not replaced, transformed. And that's when something changes inside you. You begin to realize that that space, one that seemed impossible to fill, it was not occupied by another. It was continued, in a different way, more subtle, but still present. Maybe you'll look at the new dog now and see beyond what you saw before, not as someone who arrived to erase the past, but as part of something that is not finished. And that brings a different calm, a peace that never comes from forgetting, but to understand. Because deep down, what you built with the one who left did not disappear. That stuck with you, in your gestures, in your habits, in the way you love, and maybe found a way to stay there too, not as a copy, but like an echo, a living echo, which manifests itself in detail, in behaviors, in moments that don't seem coincidental. And now, when you hear that sound, it doesn't hurt like it used to. He plays, it connects, he remembers, but it also comforts. And perhaps this is what no one has explained to you until today. Some links, they don't just belong to a single story. They cross, they remain, they find ways, and sometimes they come back, not to repeat what was, but to continue what never ended. Now tell me, if you've ever felt this, if you've noticed something in your current dog who reminded you of the one who left, right here in the comments, tell your story. Because when a person talks, others recognize it. And maybe, what did you experience? Be exactly what someone needs to understand today. And if this video touched you in any way, stay here, because there are things that we are only beginning to understand when you allow yourself to feel until the end. And in the midst of this silence that once hurt so much, maybe you'll notice that that sound was never just a sound. It was presence. And maybe still be. After the last sentence, pause, and then finish with this. Maybe, after all this, you'll never hear that sound the same way again. Not even silence, because some absences are not empty. They are just waiting for a new way of being felt. And maybe your dog never really left. If you believe that the bond with your dog continues in some way, comment here. He's still with me. And if this video found you at the right time, maybe it wasn't by chance.